there are a lot of people who won't be grieving this. I hear that. But as someone who is queer, my rights has been affected by her speeches.
All the people who have died as a result of the policies that the person supported.
Do you think that either any of these people would have spoken in the same way about Chris Kaba? Or how about George Floyd? Why do the people who call themselves the most tolerant love it when their political enemies die? Like Ann Widdecombe was someone whose views were maybe similar to yours and mine, whose life was brutally and unjustly taken. And many tolerant leftists have used it as an opportunity to either cheer it on or basically stand on her grave and slander her. And it's not just a few individuals. This is the way that many people are taught to think about patriotic British people. And in this video, I'm going to show you the evidence, and I'm also going to explain to you why.
Days.
Yes, I think it's really interesting how people are responding. I feel it's awful that she was murdered in her life, especially being 78 as well. I think that's quite a sad way to go out. But yeah, I think there is a lot of controversy around how she lived her political life. I'm a real believer that the values that we hold are the politics that we practice. And
notice the whole, it's terrible how she died. But yeah, let's get on to what really matters. And you can already see where this is going to go.
I feel like it would go amiss to not mention the fact that she pushed against LGBTQ plus rights throughout all of her career. I would also feel like it's time to say that she also said a lot of things about the victims of Harvey Weinstein during the Me Too. She said they chose it upon themselves, and she was vehemently anti-abortion, which in this country is not such a political issue in the same way that it's in the States. So I feel like even though what's happened is absolutely awful, there are a lot of people who won't be grieving this.
Notice like what's implied there, right? It's like, because she was such a nasty person with these horrible, disgusting views, does she really deserve our sympathy? Now, imagine if you're someone who shares many of the beliefs that Ann Widdecombe had, which many people around the country do, is this the way that people like her would be thinking about you?
Do you think that's fair at a time when she's...
To be honest, I'm a bit shocked to hear that. I think that's completely inappropriate, and I think you will regret what you just said there.
I'm just stating the facts of her political
career. A lady
career
has been murdered, and actually
exactly,
on some of the things
awful.
you said, there's lots of people, there's lots of gay friends of hers, she said, and I said in the comments, many of the points she made were grounded in her faith, her
I'm
beliefs,
also a Christian,
which are shared. You may not, but respect her views. And respect many other people's views who fundamentally disagree with you. And I'm really sad to be sitting on a chair here today next to you, because
but as someone
I'm quite uncomfortable sitting next to you after what you just said, to be honest.
I hear that. But as someone who is queer, my rights has been affected by her speeches. She has been a part of reform, which, as someone who had to live through what was a race riots of last year, her actions have contributed to a lot of my community having very difficult lives. So yes, it's awful.
Shaking your head there. This has been playing out.
Okay, we're going to ignore the idea that you can be queer and Christian for just this video. Okay, maybe we'll touch on it on another one. But isn't it ironic how she's standing there on live television talking about how Ann Widdecombe's views made her unsafe, and that she fears for her life, and that she had to go through such terrible race riots last year because of views that Ann Widdecombe held. Meanwhile, Ann Widdecombe is the only one who is currently in the ground for her views. Notice how there was nothing said about how people shouldn't act in this way when they disagree with someone. Notice how there was nothing said about having dialogue with people, about debating with people, instead of attacking them in this manner. Instead, it was all basically saying, yes, this was terrible, but the person was even worse. That's the thought process. And now, this isn't just coming from a climate activist university student, as Days is. This is also coming from universities themselves. Like, this university worker was charged over comments that this bloke, Heather, made after Ann Widdecombe's passing. He said it was good news. And in fact, according to the Telegraph, this university worker also said that they hoped Anne experienced a painful death, and that she was screaming in agony. This is coming from universities. I told you, it's not just an individual issue. And in fact, it's not just coming from university students, university workers, our political commentators, the commentariat. It's also there as well. I mean, just listen to this political activist explaining why Ann Widdecombe was actually a murderer because she voted Brexit.
being in jail. Like, we went through all this with Charlie Kirk. Like, I opposed his murder, but I was not going to pretend that I was sad about his death. It is that simple. And in a similar way, it feels disrespectful to all the people who have died as a result of the policies that the person supported to shed more tears or show more empathy per person for the person who helped cause their deaths. You feel me? Because it was the policy of the Reform Party, so Nigel Farage and Widdecombe, to go for a no-deal Brexit.
Ann Widdecombe is essentially responsible for the death of 1,500 people because she voted for Brexit. And so why would you feel sorry for her when her life is brutally taken? Like, comparing the interpretation of the knock-on effects of her policies with somebody actively taking her life in that manner is absolutely ridiculous. It would be like me saying that Femi and all the leftists are responsible for the death of people like Govinda Jahal, Rhiannon White, Wayne Broadhurst, all the people whose lives have been taken by asylum seekers because they support a relaxed open borders policy. They support increasing routes to migration and to asylum, even though these kind of things are happening. Like, do you see how ridiculous that would be? But for them, it's not. It makes perfect sense. And before I explain to you why it makes perfect sense for them, I want to just play a game of whataboutery. Because, you know, whataboutery gets a really bad rep. But I actually think it's brilliant to show people their double standards and to hold people to a higher standard. Do you think that either any of these people would have celebrated or would have spoken in the same way about the death of Chris Kaba, who was killed by a police officer after he tried to ram police officers with a car the day after that car was reported stolen and was used in a previous shootout? The same Chris Kaba who was a part of a gang, 6'7", made drill music talking about crime and shooting people and actually shot somebody in a nightclub. Do you think they would say the same thing about him? Do you think they said the same thing about him? Do you think they used his death, as an opportunity to do that? I don't think so. Or how about George Floyd? You know, do you think they used his death as an opportunity to remind the world that this guy was actually a serial criminal, that he was trying to steal using counterfeit money, that he'd been arrested several times for various burglaries and all sorts of things? Like, do you think they would have responded the same way to George Floyd? I highly doubt it. And there's a reason for that. Because it's not just about who Ann Widdecombe is, it's about what Ann Widdecombe represents in their minds. And Ann Widdecombe and anybody who thinks like her represents the oppressor. Now, in their mind, who is the oppressed? Well, the oppressed is the LGBT community, Black people, Asian people, women. And if you tick multiple of those boxes, for example, if you're a Black queer woman, as Days, for example, is, then you are at the top of the oppressed Olympics. And who is the oppressor? Well, the oppressor would be Britain, the West, the patriarchy, heterosexual marriage, for example, heterosexual monogamous marriage. That would be the oppressor. They view the world between a struggle between the oppressed and the oppressor. And so whenever somebody from the oppressor class or somebody demonstrates views that they see are causing the oppression in the world, causing countries to be poor, causing different outcomes for asylum seekers or anything that shows disparities for Black people and white people, etc., 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 then you are the problem. And so that's why they can never really have sympathy for you, even if you were to be ended in the most tragic way. And now notice the way that they speak about harm as well. They consider her views to be what has caused them harm. Now, it's not even like we're talking about Adolf, right? Who was trying to tell people you're going to the concentration camps, was gassing people and doing all those sorts of things. I can understand why people would celebrate the death of someone like Adolf, right? Because it brings a complete end to so much of the actual suffering that's taken place. However, what's happening now is there's the perception of harm. Again, as I said, Ann Widdecombe is in the ground, whereas Days the activist and Femi the activist and Heather the activist, they are not. They are the ones whose lives will continue, whereas Ann Widdecombe is the one who's actually been harmed by other people. And yet they look at her as the cause of harm because they see themselves as victims, perpetual victims. And anybody that they think represents the system causing their victimhood is a problem, and they cannot have sympathy for that person. So you'll notice the whole, what happened to them was tragic. but let's really talk about who they were. That's almost like it's a tick box so they can just get on with what they wanted to say. You know that Days didn't come onto the BBC because she wants to express any condolences for Ann Widdecombe. She just wanted a megaphone to be able to, again, reinforce her woke ideology. And this will continue to happen for as long as that victimhood narrative persists, for as long as people are taught by their schools, by our media, by our government, that if you belong to certain protected groups, like if you're black or if you're queer or if you're this or if you're that, then you are a victim. And anybody who doesn't belong to those groups can never be a victim. You're going to get it continuing. That's why, again, they'll have more sympathy for the asylum seekers than they would for the young English girls that were attacked by the grooming gangs. Again, if you belong to the wrong group, if you're not part of one of their oppressor classes, you don't get sympathy. And this was what the turning point for me was, realizing that I ain't no victim. Okay, I'm a black guy living in one of the most prosperous nations the world has ever seen, with free healthcare, free access to education until I was 18, so many benefits and blessings, infrastructure, and I live in a majority white neighborhood now and walk around freely and no one's out there to get me. My life is chill, my life is comfy, thanks be to God. I am not a victim. That's what it takes for people to break out of this kind of hatred and animosity they have towards others. That's why people who are even in the most privileged of positions can still consider themselves to be victims, because it's, I guess, a way for them to feel better about themselves or to avoid scrutiny, to avoid accountability for having the views that they have. And we just need more people to burst those echo chambers and show you ain't no victim, my friend. And in fact, one of the reasons I run this channel is because I want to highlight how much the media plays a part in that victimhood, because they ignore the suffering that people from the majority groups experience. White British people, for example, experience because of the grooming gangs and stuff. And they'll look for racism everywhere when it comes to, let's say, a black person, or when it comes to an Asian person or anything like that. And we need to expose it. And to see another example of that being exposed, check out the video on your screen. You need to watch it. I will see you there. Peace and blessings.